We are live once again on Proline TV and the Ourlads Football Network. We're talking more off-season NFL football, and it's time to talk about the Baltimore Ravens. And when we do that, Russell Street Reports Tony Lombardi joins us. Tony, good to talk to you again.
Likewise, Greg. Thanks for having me as always.
You got it. So I broke out the Michigan polo shirt. I know I have my logos back there, but I felt in this interview, I thought it was appropriate to bust it out based on the Ravens' new head coach. So we'll get into that, obviously, from the get start. We're also going to take a look at who Tony believes would be Baltimore's top 5 offseason needs. We'll take a look at free agency and maybe even some casualty players to keep on the lookout and much more. So let's get right to it. Tony, starting with the coaching staff. So far, it looks like things are working out. Not only did the Ravens get, which it seemed like it was going to be their guy all along. It seemed like too good of a match based on the Harbaughs and Michigan and all that stuff. But even from what I'm seeing so far with the way the staff is being assembled, it looks like it's a pretty nice, exciting staff.
It is. And Jesse spent, I think it was at least 4, maybe 5 seasons with the Ravens as a defensive assistant, and he even overlapped a little bit with Mike McDonald. So there's some, the trees and the roots and the branches from the Harbaugh tree are all there. Yeah. And I think that he fits in a lot of ways. I think the reason that John Harbaugh was let go is I believe Steve Bisciotti got to the point where he felt as if, given the talent on the team was underachieving. And I also didn't think that he believed, based upon his press conference back earlier in January, that the coaching staff was doing a good enough job in developing the talent that they had. He got tired of all the blown fourth quarter leads. The way the Ravens approached the fourth quarter was so different than the way they approached the first 3 quarters to get them those leads. And I think he just got a little bit he thought, I believe the conclusion was that it's a philosophical thing, so it's time for a new philosophy. And hence Jesse Minter, after an exhaustive search, that they had a wide net out, Greg. I mean, they talked to a lot of different people. They did a lot of Zoom interviews. They included some of the players. They narrowed that down to some people that they wanted to talk to in person, and finally landed on Jesse Minter. And Jesse looks and talks the part. He's a smart guy. He's a guy who has grown up around coaching. His dad was a coach. He's been involved in football his entire life. He did a great job out in Los Angeles with the Chargers as their defensive coordinator, and I think he's really ready. And one of the things I believe that the Ravens wanted in a head coach was somebody who was capable of calling plays. John Harbaugh didn't have that skill. He was a special teams guy, so he didn't have the capability of calling offensive or defensive plays. Obviously, Jesse does, and he'll be doing that with the Ravens. Now, you would think that by doing that, you might limit the pool of good candidates for a defensive coordinator position because those guys aren't calling the plays. They aren't putting that on their resume. Their resume will show up as a defensive coordinator, and maybe they did well. But was it really the defensive coordinator that helped them get there, or was it the head coach who also couples as a play caller on the defensive side? So I think it was a real coup to get a guy like Anthony Weaver, who some thought was a good head coaching candidate. And so they brought Anthony on board. He's familiar with the Ravens, was an assistant coach here, played in Baltimore as well, his first 3 or 4 years of his career. So he's very familiar with the culture, and that was a good get for them. On the offensive side, the one negative, I think, of Declan Doyle is that he hasn't been a play caller.
No.
So, but he's been under guys like Sean Payton and Ben Johnson. But it's one thing to be closely attached at the hip to those guys as they're making those play calls. It's another thing to do it yourself, particularly when live bullets are flying in pressure situations, right? So we've experienced that in Baltimore with Zach Orr, who had no play calling experience on the defensive side. So to help massage that a little bit, they brought in some other good offensive coaches. They brought in Joe Lombardi, no relation, but a good last name, by the way.
Yeah, right. But maybe that'll get you some extra.
He has been a guy who's had good passing attacks as an offensive coordinator. He's done well in that regard. His running game isn't all that great, but he can help with the play calling and the passing game. now where Joe Lombardi falls short in the running game, they bring in a guy from the Atlanta Falcons. His name is Dwayne Ledford. And Dwayne has those stretch zone concepts. And imagine what they did down there with Robinson and what's it, Algiers is this the other running back's name?
Yes. Tyler Algier. Yes.
They did such a great job with those guys. They had top running attack for the last 2 years. Now plug in Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. You got all those things, all those bases covered. So I think he's not just going for the best guys available, but the best guys that are complementary coaches to what he's already got in place. And so far, it's working out pretty well.
I mean, it all sounds logical. And that's why I guess the fan base is excited. And that's what they want to see. They want to see a plan. They want to see that even if it fails for some reason or doesn't get off to a good start, hopefully they'll remember and that they were bought in. And I'm sure, like you said, with the whole coaching thing being that important and the way it looks on paper, I'd be quite surprised that if something happened this upcoming season and things did go off to a slow start, that it would be because of coaching, because that's a lot of talented coaches that they've assembled on that staff so far. And we know in the NFL, we're seeing it, of course, just this past season. Not only with Vrabel, and there's a lot more to Vrabel, of course, to the Patriots' success than Vrabel, but he's a big part of it. Throw in Cohen with the Jags. Look how instantaneously the Jags all of a sudden took off, and we can go down the road with a few other guys. So, yeah, and including McDonald in Seattle. So it's just it's a reason that I just never understood why it took so long for owners to pay coaches. I never understood. They had a cap for players. There's only so much they could spend there, but there's no cap to how much you're going to pay a coach, and how important it is to not only hire the right coach and be willing to give that coach whatever he needs to be successful if you believe in him, but the staff, and to make sure that those guys are paid the way they should be paid, because those are the guys also that are going to build up. And like you just said, they're going to develop the players necessary in order for an organization to succeed.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. And the thing I think that got the Ravens over the hump to get to the point to look beyond John Harbaugh, because Steve Bisciotti's on record many times saying he really likes continuity in his organization, because if you have continuity, it makes your operation work a little bit more smoothly over time. But sometimes continuity bumps up against complacency. And I think that's what's happened with the Ravens the last couple of years. And when complacency sets in, so does underachievement. And I think he got fed up with that. So it was good for Ravens fans to finally get the owner pissed off, because that's what he is right now. And he, in his press conference, his press conference was lauded all over the nation. And because he was so transparent, it was so refreshing, because as Ravens fans and people who cover the Ravens like myself, you just got tired of all the word salads from John Harbaugh. He said a lot without saying a single thing. And it just got to be really old. So when you get back to an owner that's a little ticked off, he thinks his team's underachieved. He said during that press conference, we're going to work really hard to get this extension done for Lamar Jackson. If it doesn't work out, we're going to restructure his deal, because we're going to free up some cap space to go out and get what we need. And that was refreshing to hear also from a Ravens fan's perspective. And then, there's some trepidation because it's new, right? A whole new coaching staff. Sure. No one's familiar with them. It's new. You kind of read about them. You hear about them from other people. You hear players talk about Jesse Minter. He's my dog, and he's all these things that players love him. But until they step foot on the field and it shows up on the field as a winning team, you're not sure. But I harken back to 2008 when the Ravens hired John Harbaugh. I remember talking to Eric DeCosta back then. I'm like, you just got rid of Brian Billick, and you're talking to guys like Brian Schottenheimer. Now he's a head coach, but he wasn't then. He was, really green. And John Harbaugh, a special teams guy with the Philadelphia Eagles. Why are you talking to these guys? Because you had just such an alpha male with Brian Billick, and you're talking to these guys no one knows about. And he said to me, John Harbaugh is really interviewing well, so don't go to sleep on him. And so I said, okay, I take your word for it. And here we are 18 years later talking about his replacements. I'd say that was a good run.
Yeah. And of course, it's one of those things where it's better for both parties, because Harbaugh cannot go to the Giants. And if he just gets them to be competitive next year, he's doing a great job. The fans love him. Everything's great. And so that's good for him. And it's also good for him just because he probably needs also a change of scenery. because he probably was getting tired himself of saying the same stuff over and over and over again. Now he can say some new stuff that won't get tired for at least a few years. And as long as he's winning, the Giant fans will love him.
Or he'll say some old stuff that people will think is new in New York.
That's true. Yes. Good point. All right. So that's the coaching staff update. And let's now talk about, cap space looks good. So there shouldn't be any issues there. So if they want to go out and spend on a top player, they'll have the money to do that, correct?
They do within limits, but I think the Lamar Jackson either extension or restructure is going to be really key to that. And they've got some other guys that are veterans that haven't really been performing to the level of their contract. The Ravens have been pretty good in the past going to guys like that. They did with Ronnie Stanley a couple of years ago. They said, Ronnie, you can go out and test free agency, but you don't have a good tape to show from 2025, let's say in this case. And therefore, we want you to take a pay cut. And Ronnie likes the culture. He's familiar with the Ravens and says, okay, we'll do that. And so he takes the pay cut. So I think there's some guys like that on the team that they could go to. Off the top of my head, it could be Marlon Humphrey. It could be Roquan Smith. So that remains to be seen if they need to do that or not. But I think that they've got a situation where, there's going to be some guys that are going to leave the Ravens that Ravens fans aren't going to be happy about. But they have to look at the big picture. They have to look at the struggles from 2025. Where did they fall short? And if they fix those holes, I think some of the guys that they might lose in free agency might be overlooked because they strengthen themselves up in areas of real need.
Okay, well, let's start. First of all, are there any veteran players who might get cut to save money? I could see the dead cap deal here is not very enlightening with Matabuke, but is he going to be back? Is he going to be restructured, or are they going to let him go?
They'll never let him go. He's got an injury, Greg, that a lot of people thought, and some sources that I have thought was going to be a career-ending injury.
Oh, okay.
And he did that in week 2 against the Browns. And in doing that, he was, it was really quiet. People kept asking about what's going on with Nnamdi Madubuike. And But lately, over I think it's the last 2 weeks, he's been dropping these cryptic tweets about, he's got, a faithful thing with prayer, and then it'll be something that's optimistic. And basically, if you follow the breadcrumbs, it feels like he's telling the world that he's going to be back.
Okay.
If he comes back, and he was a big part of why the Ravens failed this season defensively, because between him and Travis Jones in the middle there, that's a good 1-2 tandem. And they can put pressure on the quarterback from the interior position. The edge guys were not getting home without having Nnamdi out there. It really, really hurt them. So if he comes back, because most people have kind of written him off, I know fans have, because they think he had a career-ending injury, then I think what'll happen is it's almost like having another number 1 pick if he comes back, because he's that good.
I remember, so his play appeared, even though maybe it didn't look like that to most people, but I remember talking to you about it, that his play kind of dipped last year. I mean, in 2024. But did that have anything to do with the injury, or was that just a down year and then the injury came and it's just 2 bad years in a row?
I think that was, this year he only played 2 games, because I wouldn't say he had a bad season.
That's true.
I think through 5 games, the Ravens only had 4 sacks, and 2 of them were Nnamdi's.
Okay.
So he was playing well to start the season until he got hurt. Last year, I don't think injury was an issue. The injury that was an issue was to Travis Jones, who played hurt all year. He could get singled up versus being doubled up like he should be when he's playing healthy. And that meant a lot of focus was on Nnamdi. So he got a lot of double teams in 2024 that he didn't get in 2023.
Got it. Excellent. Okay. Are there any players on the roster that they can cut to save money?
Well, we got our guy, Brian McFarland, who goes through all this stuff, and he talks about different guys who could be cap casualties. And there's not really that many that really stick out. Marlon Humphrey is one. He didn't have a great season in 2025, but I also think that is part and parcel to the fact that the Ravens had a terrible pass rush. I think all those guys get exposed after a while, right?
That's true.
And when a quarterback isn't pressured at all, you've got guys who just eventually they get open. And so I think Marlon Humphrey is a guy. I think that Roquan Smith is a guy they could go to and say maybe we need to take a pay cut or something to that effect, like they did with Ronnie Stanley to try to lower his cap number. But other than that, I don't see any guys that are real cap casualties that could that they could let go of because they haven't performed to level their contracts. Like I said, other than those two guys.
Okay. Let's now talk about the free agents right now for the team. We'll start on defense. And you mentioned there are going to be some decisions, hard decisions that are going to be made. Defensively, there seems to, let's see, it looks like there's a handful of guys to really zero in on. On the defensive line, there's Draymond Jones, Bryant, and Urban, but Draymond Jones is the only one that really sticks out. What's up with Jones? Do you think he'll be back?
That's a good question. It depends on what they do at the edge position. If they dive into the free agent waters and get a guy like Trey Hendrickson, that could change their willingness to try to go get Jones. But what they liked about Jones is he's a pretty good rusher from the interior. But that said, if Nnamdi comes back, that might negate the need for him, and that might be a luxury rather than a need. So Jones is kind of on the bubble as far as I can see. If Nnamdi if he's healthy enough to return, then I think that the need for Jones goes away. But then again, they might be bitten so hard by the fact that they couldn't get a pass rush last year that they might have an excess this year because they don't want to be in that same situation again.
Okay.
So Jones is a guy. Now you mentioned Brent Urban. Urban is a guy. It's at least the last 2 seasons, maybe 3, where they waited until the very end to sign him to a veteran minimum. He loves playing in Baltimore, loves the culture. He's one of these guys that's like the class clown on the bench. They just love having him around. He maybe gets, I don't know, 10 to 12 snaps a game, not a whole lot. And he's a guy who just really fits in well with the culture. By the time they have to get down to 53 men to get to the 53-man squad, they cut him with the promise they're going to bring him back once they get another guy to clear waivers. So it's one of those things where he could be back, but what is he now, 34 or 35? I don't know how much game he's got left in him.
Okay. Defensive backfield, you got Gilman and Washington. We'll start with Gilman. Good player. He's 29. Is this a player that they would like back?
That's an interesting question because if you think about where he came from, how he landed with the Ravens traded Odafe Owe to get Gilman. And they made that trade with the Chargers where Jesse Minter
That's right.
was a defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting to see if Gilman is the guy. But I think not both of those guys will be back, Gilman and Washington.
Okay.
Of the two, if I had a preference, it would be Washington. I think Ardarius he's a playmaker. He's a guy that pound for pound is one of the best tacklers on the team and just seems to be at the right position at the right time to make plays. And he came on at the end of last season after an Achilles injury and played pretty well towards the end of the season. And it depends on what Minter wants to do in terms of his backfield, his secondary. But I think, they're going to have Hamilton, he's a Swiss Army knife, right? He's going to be all over the place. Minter will use him a lot like he used Derwin James with the Chargers. So you've got that going on. You need a traditional safety, which Malachi Starks is going to be. Who's going to be alongside him? I think I like Washington a little bit better. And the fact that Minter was willing to let Gilman go, I think that probably the handwriting's on the wall.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, edge. You've got Kyle Van Noy, who's now 35. And unfortunately, David Ajabo, things at this point in his career just never worked out. Will Ajabo need a fresh start? And what about Van Noy? Does he have anything left in the tank?
I don't think he does. They could say that we didn't get a really strong interior pass rush. It's why I think Van Noy only had 2 sacks this season. where he had double-digit sacks the year before, and I think 9.5 the year before that. So Father Time hasn't lost yet, and I don't think he's losing with Kyle Van Noy either. Great guy to have around. Maybe he's back, but on a reduced salary. He brings good leadership. I think if they go out and get some young edge guys in the draft, or if they bring in another younger guy through free agency, I think that he'd be a good guy to have around if the roster could support having him. But if Ajabo's still in the team, the Ravens have failed to address that position, adequately.
Yeah, Jabo, that's one of those situations where sort of like Owe, because and what I mean, but what I'm saying is that these young guys that are talented and they're high picks, and they just need a change of scenery. Sometimes they'll never get it. Sometimes it's injury, and the injury is just never heals the way it should properly, and then that player just is not going to be that guy. But I do wonder whether or not there'll be a team out there that'll just offer them more money, no matter what that price tag is, that the Ravens will look at it and be like, well, okay, best of luck.
I don't think the Ravens will even offer it.
They will even, okay. It's time for him to, they know it's time for him to go elsewhere.
Yeah, and maybe one of his biggest proponents was John Harbaugh, because of his ties to Jim in Michigan and that shirt you're wearing. That it could be that's the reason he hung around as long as he did. He did really nothing. He did next to nothing for the Ravens. And Oweh's a different story. I think Owe has talent, but his talent didn't fit Zach Orr's scheme the way he was running it this year. He went out to San Diego or to Los Angeles with the Chargers. He had 0 sacks with the Ravens in 5 games. Through the balance of the rest of the season, he had 7.5 sacks, and then in that playoff game, he had 3 sacks.
Crazy.
So they now you could say that he had more talent around him, so maybe he wasn't double teamed, which is true. They had a good pass rush, but I think it's more about scheme and
yes.
And Minter took instead of taking the player and jamming him into the scheme. Minter, I think, looks at the player and says, how can I use him to help our defense the best way?
Well, Jabba would probably be headed to the New York Giants. That might be his target spot.
Yeah, I think you'll see more than just Jabba's a possibility, but I think you'll see a few players head to the New York Giants from
probably.
But it's not really. I'm not pointing the finger at John Harbaugh saying that. I think that's kind of a trend.
It is
when you work with some people who have done well with a certain team in a certain system, and you like that guy and he works hard. I think they might bring a lot of those kinds of players.
Yeah, and it's usually the veterans, the guys like maybe a Woozy, who is also a free agent. He's 31, and again, there were some secondary issues last year, but Woozy seemed to play well. So is this a guy that they'd like to have back?
I think it is, because Ozzie Newsome has driven into the head of any personnel person that's walked in that building, that you can never have enough corners. And so I think Awuzie did a great job last year when he was healthy, but he's got a track record of never. I don't know the last time he played all 16 or 17 games in a season, and that's the knock on him. But when he was out there, I thought he did a really good job.
Okay, let's go
to that last play against the Steelers when they had that stop and go and they scored a touchdown, which was, you or I could have completed that pass.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's the only one the fans care about, or some of the fans care about. All right, offense. So they're not going to let Linderbaum go, right? Like, even if they can't come to an agreement, will they tag him?
I don't think they'll tag him. The tag is what, $26 million? I don't think you pay $26 million for a center.
It's really that high for a center? Wow.
Well, it's not. It's when you tag an offensive lineman, it's all offensive linemen have the same tag number.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's when you tag him, he's going to get the biggest. He's going to get as much as the highest paid left tackle.
Now, is that the same on every position, or just the offensive line?
No, I think it's just the offensive line.
Okay. Is that because of how flexible it's been lately, where you just don't? Everybody has no idea what position you're going to play.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you're right, and sometimes you have one of those Swiss Army knives across the front. Yeah. Like the Ravens had that with Patrick McCarry. He could play center, guard, or tackle. So how do you quantify where is it by the number of snaps? And so I think as a result of that, they decided to make it one cap number. So I don't think they'll tag him. I saw a projection by Pro Football Focus. They had him at a 4-year, $70 million deal.
Okay.
And I said to my cap guy, Brian McFarland, I said, Brian, what do you think of this deal? He said, Tony, if that was the deal for Linderbaum, it would have already been done. So I think it's a bigger number. I think he's going to push for $20 million a year. And $20 million centers, I don't know. Can you justify that? That's, and this is the rub I had against him making him a first-round pick back in, 2022. When you draft a center in the first round, and the Ravens historically haven't paid centers a lot of money, eventually you're saying we're going to pay centers a lot of money and we're going to keep a first round pick around.
That's right.
So if your intent, I think your intent should be a first round pick is a guy you think is a career Raven or a career whoever drafts you, right? And I don't think that, I don't know, maybe he was the best guy on their board and they decided they were going to take him, but
might have been
first round centers. I don't know.
Might have been one of those things where, hey, even if we only get him for 4 years, we're this close to winning a championship, and we need him, and let's just do it. Worry about it down the road.
But I'm thinking, when you look at all the money that you have to spend, and you allocate it, appropriately, do you put $20 million a year into a center when they definitely need 2 guards? You've got an aging left tackle. Offensive line was a big issue for the Ravens last year, a big issue. And, Lamar Jackson made some spectacular plays against the Steelers, and he was getting killed. So I just think that that's something they have to fix. So people would say, well, if you're going to fix the offensive line, why would you let your center go? I mean, I would really like to talk to an offensive line coach. What is more important, that center, or could you disperse that money across 3 positions, and 2 guards and a center, and get that kind of production? Because Tyler Linderbaum is good. He's a really good center, but he's not good enough to make up for the turnstiles that he had to his left and right.
Yeah, and I think because they have an athletic quarterback, I think that helps. I think if they had a more stationary pocket passer, they might be more inclined to be like, we need one guy, we need an elite guy up the middle because we just can't afford to have that pass rush come up the middle. Because I saw that as a problem with the Detroit Lions this past year. As soon as they lost their all-caliber center, most of the problems they were having was opposing teams were just jamming them up the middle, and Goff wasn't able to get comfortable back there, and that was a big issue. But I think with Jackson, maybe that's part of it. Maybe they'll look at it and say, I think we can handle this a little bit better if our line, like you said, across the board was handled properly fiscally, as opposed to just giving everything to Linderbaum when our quarterback has the athletic ability to handle that sort of pressure.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but it's really interesting to see the drop off in the guard positions for the Ravens in 2024 to 2025, when the personnel really didn't change all that much. What happened? And Steve Bisciotti said it during his press conference. He said he didn't see the development of those guys with the coaching. So it's got to fall. You can't fire all the players, so you got to get rid of some of the coaches sometimes.
Well, maybe that's the way they'll look at it. Is we've got better coaching now. We can handle losing Linderbaum, because just look at the Niners. I mean, even though you see a drastic difference when Trent Williams isn't there, still, it's basically Trent Williams and that's it. And they don't ever draft guys high based on it's a system, a run offensive line, right. And so teams can do that.
And I think that's what they're hoping that the offensive line coach Dwayne Ledford can bring to the team to help, get more out of your guys. I think they'll still improve personnel wise, but what can we do to get more out of our guys?
Okay. Next, let's talk about how about tight end, Likely and Kolar, because Kolar seems to be a nice number 2, 3 tight end. And what's up with Likely? A lot of people would have guessed by now that at least last year would have been a big year for him. But of course, they brought back Andrews. I don't know if that stunted his development or his production, but did he regress? Was it injuries? Why hasn't he gotten to a different level of his game yet?
He did have an injury that he suffered during training camp that I believe he broke a bone in his foot. And I think he was out for the first 5 games. Could have been 6, but I think it was 5. I'd have to look it up. But so that did set him back. You go through training camp and then you break your foot. You're off for 5 or 6 weeks, and then you're trying to get back up to speed. So I think that had a lot to do with, his down year. But that guy just seems to step up in big games and make big plays. And he's a good blocker. He's a different kind of player. He's not your inline kind of tight end. He's a guy that can really do some damage along the edge with blocking, but and it's particularly out in the open field. But I think he's a guy that can make plays down the field. He's a mismatch for linebackers. He's too big for D-backs. So he presents mismatch problems, and he's got good hands, and he's good after the catch. So I would like to see him hang around. I don't know what kind of money he's going to get. The Ravens tried to get him on a deal, and there was some rumors before the season started that they were close to a deal. Then they called it. Then they said it wasn't a deal, and now that he had a bad year, what's his market value? Maybe they look at some of his playmaking ability, and some team thinks I could use a guy like that, and we're going to pay him accordingly. But he's going to be a really tough call for the Ravens. Maybe they say, let's do a 1-year prove-it deal. I'll get back on track in 2026, and next year I'll be a free agent where I'll make more money. Maybe they can talk him into something like that. I'm not sure. With Charlie Kohler, I think the Ravens made a big mistake extending Mark Andrews. It's obvious that he's on the back end of his career, and he's slowed down. He's made some critical drops at times. He's a well-liked player, works his butt off, is a leader. Can't say enough good things about the human being. And he was a great player for the Ravens for a long time, but he's on the back end of his career. They gave him an extension when they had these other 2 tight ends that seemed to be the future. If you look back in the Ravens during their history, they had Shannon Sharp. They drafted Todd Heap. Shannon Sharp went away. Todd Heap was here. Dennis Pitta came on board. Dennis Pitta was here. Then, you had Mark Andrews come on board along with Hayden Hurst. And so the Ravens have a history of replenishing that position. And I always thought that Ozzie Newsome was really instrumental in that since he's a Hall of Fame tight end.
Yeah.
But signing Andrews made no sense to me at all. And most people around Baltimore that cover the team didn't understand that one either. Charlie Kohler, I think, can do the things now that Mark Andrews can do now, a lot less expensively. And he's a good special teams contributor. He's a really good guy in the locker room, brings a lot of levity. Teammates love him. Charlie could stay, but I thought they could have kept both him and Likely had they not done the Andrews extension.
Any chance that with the new staff, I don't know what his contract is like, could they move on from Andrews and keep these 2?
I'd have to look at the cap numbers, but I think the cap numbers are prohibitive for 2026. After 2026, they can do that, but I don't think 2026 looks all that good. I think they'd lose money. They wouldn't save any money, and then they'd be down a player. So I don't know.
It's 11 million dead cap.
Yeah, they won't do that.
Yeah.
So I think that with Andrews, maybe he had some nagging injuries that made him look slow. I hope that's the case, but I would have been much happier knowing that Kohler and Likely were coming back and Andrews was going to do his thing and follow the footsteps of Todd Heap and go find money somewhere else.
Actually, it looks like it's 18 million dead cap, so that ain't happening. Okay. So chances are then Andrew stays. One of these 2, I mean, they got to bring back one of them. So if you had to guess which one it would be.
I think it's going to be Kohler.
Okay. All right. Your favorite offensive guard is a free agent. Is he coming back? Is that a stupid question? Will he be on the Giants?
I don't know who's going to sign him. Maybe he signs for a veteran minimum. I don't know. He started a lot of games.
He did.
And that, I guess, speaks for something. But I don't know how much you've watched him and for the audience, we're talking about Daniel Faalele. There's so many times he looks like he's playing Marco Polo because he doesn't know where he's not. He's looking around for somebody to hit, and they're all behind him. And it's just, I mean, it's not like it's happened once or twice. It happens every game, multiple times. I don't know, and you can't say that is all coaching. It's just,
well, someone's going to pay him. It's just not going to be the Ravens.
No,
it can't be.
I don't know who's going to pay him. Maybe he should.
Well, I mean, somebody would pay him something because, like you said, he's got experience.
Right.
And he's an offensive lineman and he's only 27. So someone will give him more money than the Ravens will laugh at whatever they'll give him. But I'm sure it's not going to be a lot. But yeah, he won't be around. Okay.
If the Ravens bring him back and they want to march him out there to start again, there will be a meltdown in the fan base. Because I've never, as long as I've been doing this, Greg, I've never seen a fan base hate on an offensive guard as much as they hated on him.
That's not good.
And I probably helped that cause too, because I would come up with these memes with him with a bullfighter's cap on it and a cape, and I changed his name in the back of his jersey to Olele.
So there won't be any Christmas cards, birthday cards from Falele to your house. Which is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Does Patrick Ricard get another 1-year deal?
That's an interesting call. It really is, because with Declan Doyle, he used a lot of 11 and 12 personnel. I mean, I think he was at the top of the league or near the top of the league. The Bears were in usage of that personnel package, and that really diminishes the need for a fullback. Maybe you have a fullback who's a special teams guy and you have him on your roster for, 6 snaps a game kind of thing.
Yeah.
But to pay somebody like Patrick Ricard deserves to be paid. I think he's one guy that would, if somebody said, if only one player was going to go from the Ravens to the Giants, who would it be? I would pick him.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. All right. And how about Hopkins and Wallace at wide receiver? Of course, Wallace is the younger. It just hasn't really worked out so far for his career. Hopkins, meanwhile, is getting old. He's now 34.
Yeah, I think that Hopkins was underutilized last year. If Lamar was healthier last year and the Ravens had a better offensive line, I think they would have used Hopkins a lot more. So if you assume that Lamar is going to be healthier in 2026, which is an assumption I think most people would make, and you assume that they have a better offensive line, because if they don't, they'll be hell to pay, then that points to Hopkins being a guy who could be more productive than he was for the Ravens in 2025. So it wouldn't shock me if he's back. He's friends with Lamar. He's friends with Derrick Henry. So it wouldn't shock me. However, I don't know if you saw Up and Adams with Kay Adams recently. They had Derrick Henry on, and she asked him about A.J. Brown and the possibility of reuniting with A.J. Brown like they were teammates in Tennessee. And Derrick Henry was all excited about it. He said, "Oh, it would be great. It would be me and AJ and Zay and Bate, and likely it would be great. And Mark." He mentioned Mark Andrews too. Nowhere in there did he say D-Hop. And and those guys being buddies, maybe they've already been told they're not going to bring him back. So
interesting. Okay. And Wallace, was there ever a time that it looked like that he was a young player that just needed time?
Wallace is one of these guys that he's a good special teams player. Whenever the Ravens have called upon him on offense, he seems to do well.
Okay.
But he always seems to fall down to that 4th or 5th receiver slot.
And that's pretty much what he is right now, unless he gets an opportunity somewhere else then, and maybe that's what he needs.
Maybe. And maybe his agent's trying to tell him that. But
yeah,
I think he likes playing in Baltimore. But then, if players like playing in Baltimore before because they like the culture, and now the culture is going to be different because John Harbaugh's not there, maybe now's the time for players like that to make their exodus.
Okay. One more. Well, actually, a couple more. The punter, Stout. We know how good he is. They don't cost a whole lot of money, so he'll be back, right?
I said that if there's a franchise tag to be used, it might be used on
Yeah,
him.
right.
Because that'll be the least expensive one you could have. But yeah, I think they bring him back. And Stout, he's always had that booming leg, but he's been so inconsistent up until last year. And last year he was more consistent and did a really nice job. And he did a nice job in pressure situations. So I think I'd be really surprised if he's not back.
And Keaton, he's restricted. So do you have any idea how that's going to wind up working out?
Well, and he's an undrafted player, so they can't really use a second round because it wouldn't get the Ravens any draft pick in return. So they've got to, you know, my guess is they'll try to do something with him before free agency opens up to lock him up. He's a change of pace guy. He's really suited for that 1-2 punch with Derrick Henry. I don't think they used him enough on the outside. It's like when they spelled Derrick Henry, they'd still run these between the tackle runs. And Keaton Mitchell, soaking wet, probably weighs 170 pounds.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that you could hope for in a situation like that is he gets lost and he sneaks through a hole and goes. And that has happened before. But it wouldn't surprise me if the Ravens draft a guy for, to spell Derrick Henry. But I think he stays around Keaton Mitchell.
Yeah, the tricky thing, of course, is like you said, because of his size, the injury that he already sustained is just not a surprise. I mean, you're going to get hurt when you're that small, so you really can't overspend. But yeah, I think hey, it's the same everywhere. So I doubt other teams are not thinking the same thing.
Right.
All right. Are there any? So would Madubuike and Washington, are those the only two key players that missed significant time that team anybody who really didn't pay attention to Ravens football on a weekly basis need to know about?
Well, likely missed some time.
Yeah.
And Mitchell missed some time because he was recovering from an injury, but I think that was the Ravens. They used to say that he wasn't contributing enough on special teams, therefore he shouldn't be among the active guys on a given week. But other than Madubuike and Darius Washington, those are the most significant injuries. I think I can't think of anybody else that made a difference. You had
How about developing young players outside the obvious? I want to ask you about the rookies too. But were there any developing young players, not the rookie class, that could end up being sort of like a TJ Tampa, someone that is a young guy that might end up with a lot more playing time next year based on how they've looked so far?
I think you hit it around the head. TJ Tampa, he's shown in spots that he could play. He didn't seem to be bashful in big games against tough opponents.
Okay.
That's a guy I think that could take a next step. Teddy Buchanan, he was a rookie. You mentioned rookies, but he's a guy I think could step up. But other than that, Rasheen Ali was the other backup running back. He performed okay at times last year as a guy who would spell Derrick Henry and or Keaton Mitchell and do an okay job. I don't know if he gets enough snaps to be a significant contributor next season.
What surprised me? I think it might have been, I don't know if it was the Pittsburgh game or not. It might have been. And I remember it was a pretty significant play and they handed the ball off to Ali. And I was like, really? At this stage of the game, you're giving him the ball? That shows a lot of trust. I'll say that.
It shows a lot of trust, but there were some questionable decisions by Todd Monken last year, particularly that game against the New England Patriots when they were up by 2 scores with 12 minutes to go, and Derrick Henry never touched the ball again.
Oh, jeez.
That still rankles Ravens fans and the media as well.
Can imagine.
But New England's now in the Super Bowl, right? So. And they almost won that game with Tyler Huntley as the quarterback because Lamar pulled out of that game.
Tyler Huntley with a better win percentage against winning teams this past year than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, Tyler played well in relief. I mean, his repertoire is more limited. He throws more shorter outside the numbers passes, but I think that he's a decent backup. That was a big whiff last year by Eric DeCosta signing Cooper Rush. That just never made any sense to me.
No. Does Huntley? Do you think that he comes back? Because again, with Lamar there, it would make sense that they'd bring Huntley back again.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely get an invite, and probably sign him to a minimum or somewhere around there.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if they use one of their draft picks on a quarterback. Seems to be something DeCosta usually does.
Yeah, it's a good draft for last year the same way, and this year too. It's a good draft for players that look. There's only one true number one first round quarterback. I don't know what you say, but I'm not a big Ty Simpson guy for the first round. So I think there will be some good prospects that will be available after the first round that you can say, hey, yeah, this is a kid that we can stash and develop for a few years. So may not be a bad idea because there's a lot of the team has a good amount of draft pick capital, correct?
They have a decent amount of draft capital. Yeah, they've got, I believe, 8 picks, and that's before they even get to the compensatory picks that they expect. Okay. I don't know if they're not going to. In the past years, they've had like 3 and 4 comp picks, but I think maybe they're going to be short on that this year. It might be 1.
All right.
I haven't looked at it lately.
So the rookie class, as well as I don't know if there are any of these CFAs, but
I did want to say one other thing. You mentioned about players. Devontae Walker is a receiver that I think is underutilized. He's a big receiver. Whenever he's been called upon, he's done well. So, and his route tree was limited, but he needs to be coached up a little bit. But on the outside the numbers and running crossers, he's made big plays for the Ravens. So I could see somebody like him taking a next step in red zone situations.
Yeah, I think this question that I ask all of my guests at this time of year for these types of teams with the new staff means more, because they'll come in and a player who just didn't seem to work or fit with the other staff. Oh, wait a second. Oh, this guy's perfect for what I do, what I want out of my receiver, out of my running back, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, that's something to definitely keep an eye on, because I know you talked about him when we did our season preview show.
I like him. I think he needs more opportunity.
And it looks like he could get that depending on what they do in free agency and the draft, which we're going to get to with the needs when we wrap it all up. But as far as the rookie class, how did it go?
I thought they had a good year. I'm going to go right down the line. I'm going to pull up all their draft picks and see what that looks
like. We can start on defense, because Starks and Green were the 2 headliners.
Yeah, Starks. I know they asked him to, basically play, 50 yards down the field. It seemed like he just was so far off the line of scrimmage, and so I get why he didn't make a lot of plays because of what they asked him to do. I hope the new defense uses his talents better than Zach Bore's defense did. So I'll give him a pass on his first year, although based upon what he did, I was underwhelmed. Same with Mike Green. Whenever I saw Mike Green dropping into coverage, I'm like, why are they asking a guy who came from Marshall University to drop into coverage? He's never had to do that in his life. And so, although he led the league, or led the Ravens in quarterback hits and probably even sacks in 3.5, I think he could have done better. So I expect better things from him. Emory Jones was kind of redshirted and was hurt, but I think he's going to end up being a good pick. Teddy Buchanan did well. Carson Vincent, they speak highly of. He was kind of redshirted as well, so they didn't give him much playing time. Cohn was cut, I believe, and Tyler Loop, he's going to be remembered for the kick he missed. LeJontay Wester didn't do much for me as a returner. He was basically brought as a return specialist. I don't know that you can get anybody to do a fair catch, right?
Yeah,
I don't, much. And he didn't do much on kick returns, so I think he's going to have a hard time making the team next year.
Except Xavier Smith, you can't ask him to for the Rams. You can't ask him to fair catch.
Yeah. And then they had Aeneas Peebles. He got some playing time, looked good in preseason, but he was a regular on the inactive list, healthy scratch every week.
And Longerbeam was hurt all year?
Yes, he was. Yes.
Okay. So still, a lot of players, a lot of talent, and maybe, like you said, big reason why there's a new staff. Maybe the new staff can get the most out of all these players. And then with 3 CFAs, I see here that are still on the team. Higgins, we talked a lot about because of his production and his long career in college. He's still there, as is Keandre Jackson and Keon Martin. Any of those guys look like they could be a part of something?
Jackson and Martin got a little bit of PT, and they were good special teams contributors. So I think that they've got a shot to stick in those roles. Who was the other guy you mentioned? Higgins. Higgins is. I like Higgins. And like you just said, Greg, I think that with a new staff, they might look at those guys a little differently.
Yes.
And so it's hard to really make these carte blanche statements without knowing what the new staff sees in these players.
Yep.
But I think guys like those that you just mentioned and guys like Starks and Green, all those guys I think are going to be more welcoming to this defensive staff than what they had.
Okay. Let's wrap it up with the big one, and that is the Ravens' top needs heading into free agency and the draft. So the big question I always like to ask, is there a number one need? Like guaranteed, everybody knows it. All the fans know it. This is the number one need, 100%.
Edge rusher.
Okay.
Changes the whole defense if you can get it after the quarterback, because they have good players, but because quarterbacks could get so comfortable, not even getting sacks, just knock them off their rhythm, knock them off their spots, get them uncomfortable, make them rush throws. Those things didn't happen against the Ravens, and that's why teams, I always wondered, why did they wait till the fourth quarter to start throwing the ball every play? Because the Ravens can't stop them. So I think they need to disrupt quarterbacks, and the way you do that is with edge rushers, and even if they get a defensive tackle, but again, if Nnamdi Madubuike comes back, that might change the complexion of the draft for the Ravens.
We did our first mock draft over at Ourlads with our top 2 scouts, John Cooper and Dave Syvertson, and this is what they had. This is the player they had going to the Ravens. TJ Parker, edge rusher, Clemson.
Okay.
So
after that, I think it's where did you guys have Bain going, Ruben Bain?
For the longest time before they did a mock, they had him number 2, which I was ecstatic about as a Jet fan. But then they just had him drop to 4.
Okay.
They actually believe that the top 4 here, well, everybody knows Mendoza's going. So they believe Downs, Reese, and Bain will be in the top 4, but they just don't know. It could be any of those 3.
I remember reading about Bain before this season, and they thought he was going to be like a late first, early second.
Yeah, he hadn't developed yet completely.
He really came on. I'm hoping that he runs like a 5.4 40 at the combine.
Sure you do.
and drops back down to 14. And then Jesse Minter can use the same line that Brian Billick used all those years ago when they drafted Terrell Suggs. When Suggs had a bad 40 time, they asked Billick if he had an issue with Suggs running a 5+ 40. And he said, well, I'll worry about that when quarterback starts standing 40 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. One of our viewers doesn't want Parker. And of course he's with you at Bain. And you probably are going to have to go up and get him. J.A. Wayne. But the kid from Penn State, he should be in the area code. Matter of fact, we have him with our first mock going. Where do we have him going? 22. But he could definitely go a lot earlier than that. He's that talented. So would you be surprised if they went with a guard with their first pick? Would it all depend on whether or not the right edge rusher was there? Or do you think because this is a deep edge rusher class, which it is, that there's no way they're not using their first pick on an edge rusher?
It depends on what they do in free agency, because it's been their philosophy to try to address their most glaring needs through free agency so that they don't feel forced to take a position when the draft comes. Because they spend all this time building this draft board, ranking these players, and they want to be true to that board. They spent all this time, the time and money they invested in it. So they want to be able to address free agents or their most glaring needs through free agency. If they address those needs at guard and edge rusher through free agency, then yeah, I could see them taking anybody. But a guard in the first round at the 14th pick, he better be a surefire Hall of Famer, because then we're looking at the same kind of situation we're looking at with Tyler Linderbaum right now.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Next up is number 2 guard.
Yes.
Okay. What's number 3?
They all kind of, I would say the third is defensive tackle, because they've got John Jenkins. They're not sure about Madubuike. They've got Travis Jones. After that, Broderick Washington has been a disappointment since he signed his contract, and you need depth in the rotation, and they don't really have that right now. So defensive tackle is definitely a need, and I could see inside linebacker being a need as well, because Roquan Smith hasn't played to the level of his contract, and if he continues down the path that he's been on since 2024, because when he came on in 2022, he came on like gangbusters in the middle of the season. 2023, he lit it up. 2024 and 25, he just looks slow and misses tackles and just doesn't look anything like the player that they've paid for. And so I could see middle linebacker, inside linebacker being like maybe the 4th need.
Okay. Anything else that sticks out? Wide receiver?
Corner, if they don't bring back Awuzie, that the corner becomes a need. And, they've always said, as I said earlier in the program, that they never have enough good corners. It's been almost a rite of passage for the Ravens to have a needed wide receiver. So there's that. And I think they'll always take a shot on day 3 with a running back, because that's kind of typical of what they do. Running backs are players who seem to fit well as special teams guys, and particularly with the kickoff rules being where they are now. So I could see running back being a guy a player that the position they draft, and it pretty much covers it. And as I mentioned earlier, quarterback, probably take a flyer on some quarterback too.
Yeah, because with the running back situation, if anything were to happen to Derrick Henry, and he is getting older, but if anything were to happen to him, there might be just a big, these guys have talent, but if you need someone to just count on to step in and be that guy, I'm not sure the Ravens have that guy right now.
No, and if you take away Derrick Henry and you're leaning on Rasheen Ali and Keaton Mitchell, then the defense is then focused on the receivers and shut them down, and they don't have the kind of receiving core to command a lot of, to make all those contested catches, to get, a go-to guy. Zay Flowers is a great player, but, other than him, who do they have? And so if you can't get a running game going, that threatens the offense's ability to do anything, particularly as Lamar Jackson has shown a reluctance to be the runner that he used to be.
That's true. I was just about to close off, but I will throw this in there. Another one from J.A. Wayne regarding wide receiver. Now, look, I do not expect, or does anybody expect, either Jordan Tyson or Carnell Late to be available at 14. But first of all, we got to see the medicals on Tyson, and that could make him slip. It's possible. And Tate is someone that I would not be surprised if he slipped just a little bit, but again, doubtful that either will be there. But if one were to slip based on this question, would the Ravens think of taking one of those 2 types of players, do you think?
I do. I think they would. They're true to their board. They didn't have need. They didn't have a need for safety when they drafted Kyle Hamilton. So if somebody slips, they're going to jump on them.
That's it. That's why they do. That's why they're as good as any team, over the long haul regarding the draft. They just let the draft come to them. Even Mike Green in the 2nd round was a player that most people thought could have been a top 20 player.
And he's the guy I'm excited about into the new coaching regime to see what he's going to do. I have high hopes for him.
All right. So that'll wrap it up. Tony, great job as always. It's love having you on as far as Raven fans who get an opportunity to understand what's going on with the team. You're as dialed in as anybody, and I really appreciate your time. I've got links in the description of this video where you can follow all of Tony's work at Russell Street Report. Are you doing any regular podcasts?
We're not right now, but we'll start getting into a few podcasts with my salary cap guy, Brian McFarland. We do a lot of the off-season stuff, and we go over all these guys, the restricted free agents, the free agents, who could the Ravens cap, how could or cut, how could they create more cap space? So we'll be doing a few of those podcasts in the coming weeks.
Excellent. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Greg. Thank you.
You got it. All right, that's Tony Lombardi, Russell Street Report. And again, for Raven fans out there, you won't find a better site and someone that is better to follow for your team than Tony Lombardi. We are going to be back later tonight at 7 o'clock for some horse racing coverage. If you're into that sort of thing, we'll be talking more. What else are we talking the rest of the week? College basketball. That's right. Tomorrow, college basketball. And then we'll have more football interviews starting next week. And look out for that. At least 2 to 3 every week right here. Off-season previews. You can also look at the library on our site where we have all of our interviews that we've already conducted. So we'll have all 32 between now and hopefully by the end of March, the latest. So that's going to wrap it up here on ProLine TV, part of the Ourlads Football Network, vice versa, actually. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.